In this video, you're going to understand why buying food on credit is becoming normal, not because people suddenly became irresponsible, but because the financial world has changed in ways most people never noticed. A few years ago, financing groceries would have sounded absurd. Today, it's happening every single day. Stay with me, because this story is much bigger than groceries. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you walked out of a grocery store and didn't feel at least a little shocked by the total? Maybe you didn't say anything. Maybe you just tapped your card, grabbed your bags, and drove home. But something registered. A quiet unease. The feeling that something isn't adding up, because it isn't. The average American family is now spending over $1,000 a month on groceries. That's not a lifestyle choice. That's a financial reality that has crept up on millions of people, quietly, consistently, without anyone announcing it. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. A growing number of those families are financing that grocery bill, not with cash, not with savings, but with credit. Paying for food today with money they haven't earned yet. And the most unsettling part? It's no longer shocking, it's becoming normal. That shift from unthinkable to normal is exactly what this video is about. Because when buying food on credit stops feeling strange, something important has already changed. Something that goes far beyond the grocery store. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to understand will change the way you see your financial life forever. To understand why buying food on credit is becoming normal, you have to understand something that most people missed. A quiet but fundamental shift in how the average American household survives. It didn't happen overnight. It happened gradually, almost invisibly. Over the course of 2 decades, let's go back to 2000. The average American household spent roughly 10% of its income on food. Housing was manageable, healthcare was expensive but navigable, and most families could cover their basic needs without borrowing. Fast forward to today, and the math simply doesn't work the same way anymore. Food prices have risen by over 25% in the last 3 years alone. Housing costs have doubled in many cities. Healthcare premiums continue to climb, and wages, while they have technically risen, have not kept pace with the combined weight of all those increases. So what happens when the bills outpace the income? Most people do what feels logical in the moment. They reach for the credit card, not for a vacation, not for a luxury purchase, but for eggs, bread, milk, and vegetables, for the most basic human necessity of all, food. And here's what makes this moment so significant. Credit was never designed for this. Credit cards were created as a convenience tool, a way to defer payment on discretionary spending, on things you chose to buy, not on things you need to survive. When credit becomes the bridge between a family and their next meal, something fundamental has shifted, not just in personal finance, but in the structure of the economy itself. And understanding that shift is the beginning of understanding what's really happening, not just to other people, but potentially to you. Because the line between financial stability and financial fragility is much thinner than most people like to believe, and for millions of Americans right now, that line has already been crossed, without most of them fully realizing it. Let me show you what this actually looks like in numbers, because sometimes the only way to truly understand something is to see it clearly, without the noise, without the spin, just the facts. In 2023, credit card debt in the United States crossed $1 trillion for the first time in history. $1 trillion. That's not corporate debt. That's not government debt. That's personal debt carried by ordinary Americans on high-interest credit cards, and it's still growing. Now consider this. The average interest rate on an American credit card in 2024 was over 20%. 20%. That means if you put $500 of groceries on a credit card, and you only make the minimum payment each month, you will end up paying significantly more than $500 for those groceries, for food that was consumed weeks or months ago, food that no longer exists. You are paying interest on something you already ate. Let that land for a moment, and this isn't happening to a small fringe group. According to recent surveys, nearly 1 in 4 Americans report using credit cards to cover basic living expenses, including groceries, utility bills, and medical costs, not occasionally, not in emergencies, but regularly, as part of their monthly financial routine. And here's the number that perhaps reveals the most. The average American household is now saving less than 4% of their income. Compare that to the 1970s, when the personal savings rate was consistently above 15%. We have gone from a society of savers to a society of borrowers, and the shift happened so gradually that most people didn't notice until they were already deep inside it. Now, here's what these numbers don't show. They don't show the stress, the quiet anxiety of checking your bank balance before going to the grocery store, the mental arithmetic that happens in the aisle. Do I need this? Can I afford this? Should I put this back? They don't show the conversations that don't happen. Between partners who are both worried, but neither one wants to be the first to say it out loud, they don't show the exhaustion of working hard, doing your best, following the rules, and still feeling like you're falling behind. Those numbers represent real people, people who are not irresponsible, not careless, not financially illiterate. Just people who are living in a financial system that has quietly changed the rules without telling them. Here's where most people go wrong, and I want to be careful about how I say this, because the instinct is to blame the individual, to say, well, they should have saved more, spent less, planned better, and on some level, personal responsibility matters. It always does. But that narrative, the one that places all the blame on the individual, misses something important. It misses the system. See, when one person struggles to afford groceries, it might be a personal issue. When millions of people struggle to afford groceries, it's a systemic issue. And the biggest mistake most people make is treating a systemic problem like a personal failure. They cut the Netflix subscription, they stop buying coffee, they clip coupons, meal prep, shop at discount stores, and none of it is wrong. Those things help at the margins, but they don't solve the underlying problem. Because the underlying problem isn't that people are spending too much on luxuries. The underlying problem is that the cost of necessities has risen faster than incomes for decades, and no amount of coupon clipping fixes that gap. Here's the second mistake, and this one is more dangerous. Most people respond to financial pressure by borrowing more. Not because they're irresponsible, but because borrowing feels like a solution in the moment. The credit card covers the grocery bill. The anxiety goes away, temporarily. Life continues, but the debt remains and grows at 20% interest. And next month, the same situation arrives. But now there's a credit card payment on top of the grocery bill, and the month after that, and the month after that, until the minimum payment itself becomes a significant portion of the monthly budget, and the cycle becomes harder and harder to escape. This is what financial experts call a debt spiral. And it doesn't start with reckless spending. It starts with something as ordinary as buying groceries. The third mistake, and perhaps the most invisible one, is the assumption that this is temporary, that things will get better on their own, that next month will be different, next year will be easier. But financial pressure rarely resolves itself without a deliberate change in strategy. And the longer the cycle continues, the harder that change becomes. Not because people lack willpower, but because the mathematics of compound interest work against them. Every single month, without pause, without sympathy, without exception. Here's the part that almost never makes it into the conversation. While millions of ordinary Americans are financing their groceries, A different group of people is doing something entirely different. Not because they're smarter, not because they started with more, but because they understood something early, something that changes everything. They understood the difference between using credit and being used by credit. Let me explain what I mean. There are two completely different relationships a person can have with credit. The first is what most people have. Credit as a lifeline, a way to cover the gap between what they earn and what they need, a bridge to the next paycheck. This kind of credit costs money, a lot of money, at 20% interest, and it keeps people exactly where they are, running to stay in place. The second relationship is entirely different. Credit as a tool, a deliberate instrument used to create leverage, to build assets, to generate returns that exceed the cost of borrowing. This is how people who build wealth use credit, not to buy groceries, but to buy things that produce income, real estate, businesses, investments, things that generate returns, things that make the cost of borrowing worthwhile. And here's the crucial distinction. When you borrow to consume, you pay interest on something that disappears. Food is eaten, clothes wear out, experiences fade, the debt remains, but the thing you bought is gone. When you borrow to invest, you pay interest on something that potentially grows, a property that generates rent, a business that generates revenue, an asset that appreciates over time. The debt is the same, but the outcome is completely different. This isn't a secret available only to a select few. It's a mindset shift available to anyone who understands it. And that shift starts with one question. Not, how can I cover this month's expenses? But, how can I build something that makes next month easier than this one? That question, as simple as it sounds, is the dividing line between two completely different financial futures. The person who asks the first question is managing scarcity. The person who asks the second question is building towards abundance, and the tools available to both of them are often exactly the same. The difference is in how those tools are used and why. Let me make this concrete, because abstract concepts are useful. But real stories, real numbers, real situations hit differently. Meet Sarah. Sarah is 38 years old, lives in a mid-sized American city, works as a nurse. She earns a decent income, not wealthy, but comfortable by most standards. She works hard, she shows up, she does everything right. 3 years ago, her grocery bill was around $600 a month for her family of 4. Today, that same grocery run costs her $950. Her salary has increased, but not by 58%. Nobody told Sarah this was going to happen. Nobody sat her down and explained that food prices were going to rise this fast, that her income wouldn't keep pace, that the gap between what she earns and what she needs would quietly widen, month after month. So somewhere along the way, without making any dramatic financial decisions, without buying a boat, without taking luxury vacations, without making any obvious mistakes, Sarah started putting part of her grocery bill on her credit card, just the overflow, just the difference. Net just $200 or $300 a month. It felt manageable. It felt temporary. 2 years later, Sarah has $8,000 in credit card debt, paying over $130 a month in interest alone for groceries that were eaten long ago. Sarah is not irresponsible. Sarah is not careless. Sarah is what happens when a system changes faster than anyone warned you it would. She is not the problem. She is the consequence of a problem nobody fully explained to her, and she is not alone. Now meet David. David is 44 years old, works in logistics, earns a similar income to Sarah. 3 years ago, David faced the same rising grocery costs, the same pressure, the same gap between income and expenses. But David made a different decision. Instead of reaching for the credit card, he sat down and did something uncomfortable. He looked honestly at his finances, not to judge himself, not to feel bad, but to understand exactly where he stood, and what he found surprised him. He was spending money on subscriptions he had forgotten about, on convenience purchases that had become habits without him noticing, on small things that individually seemed harmless, but collectively were significant. He redirected that money. Not dramatically, not perfectly, but deliberately. He also did something that most people never think to do. He called his credit card company and negotiated a lower interest rate. He moved some existing debt to a balance transfer card with 0% interest for 18 months. He created a small emergency fund, just $1,000, enough to cover unexpected expenses without reaching for the credit card. And slowly, imperfectly, over about 18 months, David changed his financial trajectory, not by earning more, not by some dramatic windfall, but by understanding the system he was operating in and making deliberate decisions within it. Sarah and David started in the same place, same income, same pressures, same economic environment. The difference wasn't luck. The difference was understanding, and the decision to act on that understanding, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it was slow, even when the results weren't immediately visible. That's the story behind the story of buying food on credit. It's not really about groceries. It's about whether you understand the system you're living in and whether you're making conscious choices within it or being carried along by it without noticing. So what do you actually do with all of this? Because understanding a problem is only useful if it changes something. And I want to be honest with you before we go any further. This is not financial advice. What I'm about to share are not prescriptions, not guarantees, not a one-size-fits-all solution. They are perspectives, ways of thinking that tend to separate people who navigate financial pressures successfully from people who get trapped by it. What you do with them is entirely your decision. With that said, let's talk about what actually works. The first thing, and it sounds almost too simple to be powerful, is clarity. Most people have a vague sense of their financial situation. They know roughly what comes in, roughly what goes out, and they manage the gap with hope and credit cards. But clarity is different. Clarity means knowing exactly what comes in, exactly what goes out, and exactly where the gap is, not approximately, not roughly. Exactly. Because you cannot solve a problem you haven't fully seen, and most people, if they're honest, have never fully looked. Not because they're irresponsible, but because looking is uncomfortable, and the credit card makes it possible to not look. For a while. The second thing is separating needs from habits. This is different from the standard advice to cut your spending. Cutting spending feels like deprivation, and deprivation is hard to sustain. But separating needs from habits is different. It's about becoming conscious of the automatic spending that happens without decision, the subscriptions that renew without thought, the convenience purchases that have become routine, the small expenses that individually seem harmless, but collectively represent a significant portion of the budget, bringing those to the surface, looking at them clearly, and deciding intentionally which ones serve you, rather than just letting them continue by default. The third thing is building a buffer, even a small one, $500, $1,000, whatever is possible. A buffer that sits between you and the credit card, so that when an unexpected expense arrives, and unexpected expenses always arrive, you don't automatically reach for high-interest debt. You reach for your buffer instead, and then you rebuild it. This single change, a small emergency fund, has more impact on long-term financial stability than almost any other single action because it breaks the cycle. The cycle where every unexpected expense becomes debt, and every debt makes the next unexpected expense harder to handle. The fourth thing, and this is perhaps the most important, is changing the question you ask yourself about money. Most people ask, How do I get through this month? Start asking, what am I building? Even if what you're building is small, even if it's just a slightly larger buffer, a slightly smaller debt, not a slightly better understanding of where your money goes, the act of building something, however modestly, changes your relationship with money entirely, from reactive to intentional, from managing scarcity to creating options. And that shift is where everything begins to change. And if you've made it this far in this video, I want to say something directly to you, because it means something that you're still here. It tells me you're not looking for easy answers. You're looking for real understanding, and this channel exists for exactly that. So if this conversation has been valuable, I want to invite you to subscribe. Not because of a number, not because of an algorithm, but because every week we sit down and have exactly this kind of honest conversation about money, about wealth, about the decisions that quietly shape your financial life. Hit subscribe, because every week we look beyond the headlines and uncover what's really happening to your money. There's a moment that happens, usually in a quiet place, at a kitchen table, in a parking lot after grocery shopping, lying awake at 3 in the morning, when the numbers stop being abstract and become personal. When you realize that the financial pressure you've been feeling isn't just your situation, it's millions of people's situation. And that realization does two things simultaneously. It makes you feel less alone, and it makes you understand that waiting for things to get better on their own is not a strategy. Because the system doesn't fix itself. Prices don't come down because families are struggling. Interest rates don't lower because people are stressed. The gap between income and expenses doesn't close by itself. It closes because someone decides to close it. Deliberately, imperfectly, one decision at a time. And that someone has to be you. Not because it's fair, it often isn't. Not because it's easy, it rarely is. But because the alternative, waiting, hoping, borrowing, repeating, has a cost that compounds every single month, quietly, consistently, without pause. The person who buys groceries on credit today and does nothing differently tomorrow will find it harder next month, and harder still the month after. Not because they're failing, but because that's how compound interest works. It doesn't care about your intentions. It doesn't care about your circumstances. It just keeps calculating month after month. Without pause, without sympathy, without exception. But here's what most people never stop to consider. Compound interest is not inherently your enemy. It is a force. And like all forces, it can work for you or against you, depending entirely on which side of it you choose to stand. The person who carries high-interest debt feels compound interest as a weight, growing heavier every month, demanding more and more of their income, just to stay in place. But the person who saves consistently, who builds assets, who invests deliberately, feels compound interest as a tailwind, something that quietly adds to what they have, month after month, year after year, without them having to do anything extra. The math is identical, the direction is opposite, and the choice between those two directions begins with understanding which one you are currently experiencing and deciding whether that is the direction you want to continue. Because here's what compound interest also does. When it works in your favor, even small decisions, made consistently over time, produce results that seem disproportionate to the effort. A small buffer grows, a small debt shrinks, a small shift in understanding changes the questions you ask, which changes the decisions you make, which changes the trajectory of your financial life. Not overnight, not dramatically, but inevitably. And that's the real story behind buying food on credit. It's not a story about groceries. It's a story about a system that has quietly shifted, and the choice each of us has to notice that shift and respond to it consciously, or to let it carry us along without ever fully understanding what's happening or why. And while you wait for that understanding to take root, let me leave you with something worth carrying every single day in kitchens across America. People are making financial decisions not because they planned to, not because they wanted to, but because the system they live in has quietly narrowed their options without asking permission, without sending a warning. And the difference between the people who find a way through and the people who stay stuck is almost never income, almost never luck, almost never circumstance. It is understanding, clear, honest, hard-won understanding of what is actually happening and why. That understanding doesn't come from headlines. It doesn't come from financial gurus promising shortcuts. It comes from conversations like this one. Honest, direct, without fear, without sensationalism, just the bigger picture. Behind every story that matters to your financial life, and that next step, doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to change everything at once. It just has to be conscious. One honest look at where you are. One deliberate decision about where you want to go. One small action that moves you in that direction. That is how financial lives change. Not in a single moment of inspiration, but in the quiet accumulation of better choices, made consistently, over time, by someone who finally decided to understand, rather than simply endure, and that person can be you. Starting today, starting with this conversation, starting with the simple act of seeing things clearly for perhaps the first time, and so are you. The only question now is what you will do with what you know, because knowing and doing are two very different things, and the distance between them is where everything changes. The person who understands this and acts on it, however imperfectly, however slowly, is already ahead of where they were yesterday, and tomorrow they will be ahead of today. That is the only formula that has ever worked for anyone, in any circumstance, at any point in history. Small steps, taken consistently in the right direction, always, eventually, lead somewhere worth going. This video is for educational purposes only. Nothing you heard here is financial advice. Every financial decision is yours to make, based on your own research, your own situation, your own judgment. That's not a disclaimer. That's a reminder of your own power. Here at The Bigger Picture, we'll always explore the financial questions that truly matter, not with fear, not with sensational headlines, but with honest conversations, clear explanations, and the bigger picture behind every story, because understanding your money is the first step toward taking control of it. This community exists for exactly that, and we're just getting started. If this conversation meant something to you, share it with 5 people who need to hear it. Not because it's a video, but because financial understanding is one of the greatest gifts you can give someone. Subscribe to the channel, because this conversation continues every week, and leave a comment below. Tell me honestly, have you ever used a credit card to cover groceries or basic expenses? What changed when you realized what was happening? Because this channel exists for exactly that kind of honest conversation. And the next video is already waiting.